Let me start with a little story. Once upon a time, there was an unusual wooden ship. Steering the ship was a very charismatic captain that everybody trusted. The ship itself uses a boiler engine that needs wood in order to make it move. But as the journey continues, some passengers begin to notice that the crew is cutting wood off the ship to feed into the fire for the boiler engine. The captain, however, assures the passengers that what the crew is doing is absolutely necessary and it is the only way to reach our destination. As this continues, the ship begins to leak, and although more people voice concern, the majority choose to blindly believe the words of the captain, despite what was happening. Sometime later, the leaks became uncontrollable, and the ship sank. Everybody drowned. The end. Now, this story might sound so unreasonable, because who would be that silly in real life? But the story is a deeper metaphor of how we are treating our planet today, and where we will end up if we continue down this road. My name is Melissa, and I'm one of the passengers who refused to go down with the ship. More than ever, we live in an unreasonable society, and exactly because it is unreasonable, it has created an existential crisis for humanity. Our political and economic system, just like the system of the ship, day by day brings us closer towards our mutual destruction, also known today as the climate crisis. Our collective actions not only lead to the collapse of our fragile ecosystem, but also death of animals, entire species, and humans. And yet, we are happy for the most part to go day by day operating in business as usual, as if the threat is not even real. And while our planet burns, our leaders organize conference after conference to discuss how to save the world, but also invite the very people who are causing the biggest fire. In fact, during the last big conference, the biggest delegation that came were from the fossil fuel industry. So unreasonable, in fact, that it would be like inviting dictators to a human rights conference. The same leaders then set climate goals that openly accept that things will continue to get worse until at least 2050, even though millions are already dying from the effects of climate crisis. And they also ignore our scientists, who are screaming warnings that their actions are just not enough, urging bolder solutions to take place. Many of them try to speak up and demand to be heard, but are arrested instead. Meanwhile, ordinary people like me and you are constantly being made believe that our individual choices, like not using tissue papers, are enough to save the world. And we're always given these mental burdens with questions like, what's your carbon footprint? A concept made by one of the 100 companies that contribute 71% of global emissions. The very companies that are still, by the way, until today, gets tax breaks, projects, and funding from our government using our tax money to continue doing the harm that worsens the climate crisis. Does this sound reasonable to anyone? Having a few people have that much power, making bad decisions that decide the fate of humanity. Objectively speaking, if an alien arrived at our planet and saw all this, they would say that the earthly humans are crazy, or suicidal, or both. Yet, because of our collective ignorance, we see these unreasonable situations as normal, repeatedly accepting that that's just the way society is. So, okay, so just how unreasonable is society then? On the one hand, we can say that today's modern era has allowed us to live longer than ever before. It has also created sophisticated technological breakthroughs, heck, even landed us on the moon. But on the other hand, the same modern era has also created the greatest inequality the world has ever seen, and also the greatest destruction to the planet the Earth has ever experienced. And whilst we may live longer, we're not necessarily happier. Plagued with mental issues, our obsession with body image, total efficiency, and that constant need to buy the latest cool gadget has really made us lost a sense of what is important in life. The same system we call modern society, where a 9-to-5, working 5-day a week, having only the weekends to pursue what we really care about, is considered normal. The majority of us are not even working for purpose or meaning, but are slaves to work in order to pay off our debts and rents, in order to just simply live. A type of exploitation that is robbing us from living a meaningful life. And is this what it means for humanity to thrive? Is this reasonable? Having accepted ourselves to be exploited, where the fruits of our labor mostly goes in the hands of shareholders, and we are left with a measly amount just enough to survive and not necessarily thrive, is definitely unreasonable. Accepting an economic system where short-term creation of wealth of the few through exploiting nature and communities as if we are gods with legal rights to destroy everything we touch is also unreasonable. Pursuing infinite growth through extraction of a finite planet, unreasonable. Destroying livelihoods and communities in places that the government deem fit for development, while in its process, we let them and corporations have the silent right to get away with even crimes against humanity in the name of progress. And all this justified by our collective agreement to ever increase the GDP, and for what? To create shareholder value. So I suppose the next question is, why? Why do we live in such an unreasonable society? On the one hand, we can say that things are the way it is because of the existing power structure in which the rich and powerful use all means of the state, be it through public policies, laws, even the police, to really retain power and advantage amongst the elites. This too is unreasonable, though, for the police side, because as ordinary police protects the status quo, they're actually going against their own self-interest in the long run. But this structure is not the cause. It is merely a symptom. At a deeper level, our society and economic model is based on the notion of individualism, which really promotes competition. A society operates as individuals set out to compete against one another, where some will be successful and others will not. Competition, on the other hand, always benefits those with inherent advantage or privilege, just like having a 100-meter race and starting at a 50-meter mark. An economic system designed with individualism at its core, day by day, disproportionately benefits the wealthy and powerful, the very people with an inherent advantage to begin with. But this also encourages draining the planet as we race to accumulate self-wealth, even when ultimately it goes against the very interest and survival of humanity. Well, we know it's not fair, but does it even sound reasonable to begin with? To get to the root cause of this, we have to go even deeper and recognize that this competing way of life is really based on a particular way of viewing the world, which can be characterized as the Western modernist thinking. A thinking that sees the world as separate parts, as opposed to an interconnected whole of a single existence, just like we know our planet is. This way of thinking also positions humans outside of nature, reducing the rest of nature as mechanical objects that can be controlled and conquered, instead of recognizing it as something that is life-affirming, that provides life, nurtures, protects, gives us clean air, water, and food, allowing biodiversity and humanity to thrive. This modern thinking, by the way, is a relatively new phenomenon that really began as the white men started conquering the world through colonialism. And on its path to modernized society, it also destroyed thousands of years worth of indigenous and local wisdom that have lived in harmony with nature. Under this way of thinking, the indigenous communities are immediately regarded as living in poverty and therefore need to be saved, needing development. And this, of course, is enforced to us through our education system, where our books at school even portrays the indigenous ways of living as primitive and glorifies Earth's conquest. Some even shows maps plotting natural resources by region, normalizing the accumulation of wealth through extraction, systematically indoctrinating us of this particular way of life. Now, it's inevitable that over time, the values of society shifted from one of stewardship and interconnectedness, taking only what we needed, to one of self-enrichment that is allowed to happen and come at an expense of nature and others, which really sets the foundations of today's unreasonable society. Now, we've come to a situation where the unreasonable are starting to kill us. And with all this knowledge, what must we do? Well, the first thing is to tell everyone we know how unreasonable the world is and how it really doesn't have to be this way. The second is to rebel against it, openly rejecting the unreasonable and mobilizing people to do the same. And this, of course, can and should come in many forms, as we all have our own unique abilities and spheres of influence that can be used for the collective good. We can speak up against it, advocate it, campaign for it, refusing to take part what we know to be unreasonable, even if it is still considered the current norm. On the flip side, the rebellion can also take form in promoting and doing the exact opposite to show what is reasonable instead, based on values of interconnectedness and fairness, directly contributing to building a new vision of society, embracing everyone to be on board without shaming or blaming, as we are all victims of years of indoctrination. The point is that we need to turn this unreasonable society into a reasonable society, where the beautiful values are restored as our norm, and all of us can thrive together, in which our existence in life in Earth day by day makes it better for everyone, so that our kids can grow up in a world that is better than the one we grew up in, where we don't have to constantly explain why things are so unreasonable, in which a world where people can pursue a life of meaning and purpose to realize our fullest potential. That is a reasonable society. And since our time is running out, it's only reasonable to start today. Welcome to the rebellion.